Welcome to the Employer Content Show, part of the Talent Insight series brought to you by Hire Well and Career Well. I'm your host, James Hornick. Joining me is my co-host from Job Portraits, employer brand icon, Nate Guggia.
Hey, I was just, the whole time I was waiting to see.
Yeah, it's going to be something new every week until I run
out
announced. Today's segment, how to become a destination firm.
Yeah.
And I feel like I got to define this one because I do think I'd made this up. It's not a term I found from someone else. So a destination firm is what I talk about. Like, I think that's the goal of all this. You know what I mean? That's the goal of having a great talent acquisition process, the goal of employer brand. The goal of all this is you want to build your company to be a place where people want to come to work, where people in the industry know of you, you have a good reputation, and then recruiting, everything else is just easy at that point. You know, it's the kind of place that people don't want to leave. You know, it's just a solid place. And I wanted to give a little bit of background on this because there's two parts to this. And the first is you have to be a kick-ass company to begin with. Like, you can't fake it. You can't be someplace that kind of sucks and, you know, put lipstick on a pig and all of a sudden people are going to want to come work for you. It doesn't work that way. Yeah. But that's a huge topic in itself. Like, how to become a good company, how to retain employees, all those things. Like, that would be like 10 of these shows at once. I want to work on the assumption because I do think there's a lot of companies out there that are great. There's a lot of companies out there that do a great job, high employee satisfaction, but still struggle to hire because people just don't know about them. They can't get those stories out. They don't have that kind of word of mouth, or street cred or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. I'm game. Yeah. Let's do it.
All right. So first thing, I want to lead this one off. And I know there's a bunch of other things that we're kind of want to cover on here. Online reviews. I think this is so basic and fundamental, yet so overlooked by so many organizations. Every single person looking for a job who's considering your company seriously is going to check out your online reviews. They're going to check out Glassdoor, Google, Facebook. They're going to check out G2, other sites like that. I think that a lot of companies let this kind of slide by. You know, it goes without saying that no matter how good of a company you are, someone at some point in time is going to be rubbed the wrong way and give you a negative review. But at the same time, too, if you're legitimately a great place, this should show up in your reviews somewhere. Now, the challenge is that, like, most people who are happy with their job, like, it's just not on the top of their mind. You know, it's not like, you know, how many times have you ever done a Glassdoor review?
Gosh, I don't even know if I have.
Yeah. I did one recently because the way Glassdoor is set up, you can't actually check out very much else on Glassdoor until you've done one. So they can twist your arm into that. But the reason why I bring this up is that, like, I think every single one of us out there, if you're going to buy a car or a TV or even some small mundane item on Amazon, like, everyone filters by the reviews. Everyone checks reviews out. Everyone does their research. It's the exact same product. I mean, this is a bigger purchase decision for a job seeker than any of those items I mentioned. And job seekers absolutely check these things out. I've had countless people bail on interviews and bail on processes because they read some bad reviews, you know? And I'm not saying, and I guess I need to kind of mention this too, is I am by no means saying you want to try to rig your online reviews, but there is absolutely nothing wrong with having your employees who are happy, asking them to write one, you know?
Yeah.
And I did one last thing I'll say on this. I did some research. I know there's definitely rules against, like, you cannot incentivize employees. You cannot do any kind of contest or anything else like that. If Glassdoor finds out about that, they will absolutely drop the hammer on you.
Yeah.
But it's just like Yelp or anywhere else, like, asking people to write a review. They'll do it if they want to. If they don't want to, they won't. But the bigger thing is, I even think it's also a testing mechanism too, because if you ask a few employees to write reviews and you think they're happy, but it never happens, that's also telling you something.
Yeah, for sure. I can't remember who said it. I heard it on a podcast somewhere, and it was your recruiting process and your employee experience. You should, when it comes to those two things, you should have the mindset that every single person who touches those two experiences is going to write a review. And if you can start there, then everything will link back to what that could possibly look like. I'll tell you something. This is reminding me of something that happened just yesterday. I think even outside of these platforms, we seek feedback before we make decisions, especially big decisions. Like if I'm going to remodel my house, which is something I'm going to do, I have probably talked to 10 people in my life to find out what's the best way to go about this, who they would recommend. Is this a good idea? Is this a bad idea? All this kind of stuff. And when it comes to a job, like you said, like this is one of the biggest decisions that anybody is going to make, and they're going to seek feedback. And a lot of times that feedback is outside of our awareness as an organization. And so I was on a call yesterday with a guy who was actually, I think he might've been the first recruiter at Under Armour. He was really early in, let's say, and okay. he was part of scaling that company. He worked with them for 5 or 6 years. And when he was telling me about his experience and his background, when he got to Under Armour, he just could not stop saying enough good things about that company. And at the end of the call, I said, hey, I want to point something out. The way you talked about Under Armour is the way that people talk about companies. Like they share openly their experience there. And that could go one way or another, because I've heard the opposite. And so I think like reviews, just this, we're in a review-based society or culture now that translates both like online and like visible, but there's a lot of back channel that goes on too.
Yeah. Yeah, it ties back to what I said. I mean, there's so much has to be done in terms of making it a great place, but I think that to that point, the number one thing people are going to look for is peer reviews, online, offline, and whatever you can do you need to, again, make sure you're a good place that people are going to say nice things, but you also need to, like, it's fair game to ask people to take that step, because that is something people are doing.
Yeah. This is making me think, sorry, just to jump in again with something else, but like, I think for anybody who's like on the employer branding front, which is where a lot of this touches, or at least like impacts, if somebody's coming into a company and they're going to take on employer branding, the first thing they should do is they should audit the candidate experience and they should audit the employee experience and work with whoever leads those two initiatives to find out what is exactly going on, because you could be in a position where there's stuff going on that is outside of your awareness that would just shock you. And I think like doing those kinds of audits can help, like, create processes to improve the things that we're talking about.
Definitely. Let's move on to the next point, because I know this is a big one for you.
Okay.
Thought leadership. Why don't you take the reins on this one?
Thought leadership. Yeah, I think when I think of thought leadership, first and foremost, I'm thinking about leaders of organizations putting their thoughts out there. I'm not even thinking about it at the employee level, although that's also, something that exists. But I'm thinking about how few actual leaders of organizations, like senior ups, are vocal and outspoken. And there's so much to be said about that. Like that's a level of like authenticity and vulnerability that you want to see in a leader. That is just so attractive to people who are going to work at your organization. And that's like, this is like this whole idea I talk about a ton is like attract and repel. But like, if there's a founder or a function leader or something who's speaking their mind in a tactful way, and if that aligns, like you're really bought in to the way that organization thinks, and it's super telling. And if not, then maybe you're not. But either way, it's respectable.
Yeah, I think the example I always come back to is like everybody follows Elon Musk on Twitter, but does anyone follow Tesla? You know what I mean? Like no one really cares about the brand when it comes to buying or hiring. And that's the other thing too, is because a lot of times, like you can talk about why leaders of technology or marketing or other part of business need to be vocal, but it serves multiple purposes. You know what I mean? It's not just so you can hire better. It's also to build your company brand. It's also, it's potentially having more one-to-one engagement with people. Like there's having your senior leadership being vocal on whichever platform they choose, whichever avenue they choose to do it. It makes you, it builds your credibility to hire. It builds your credibility as a product company. People in the industry can look up to you. You can get more one-to-one engagement. Like there's just so much tremendous value across the board that I know that people are hesitant to do it because they think it's time consuming. But when you look at the total value for all aspects that can touch an organization, it's enormous. And, I think that you and I know people who are pretty vocal that are, leaders of large organizations that, they kill it. They have no problem at all building out their marketing team, just because like everyone wants to work there, which is the whole point of all this.
It is. And I think there's ways too to get creative and alleviate and make this an easy lift for really busy people. So like if this is, let's say, if you're inspired to do this as a company, and let's say you're not the senior leader, but you see there's a ton of opportunity. The person has just some great things sitting inside of them that more people need to hear about. You can create ways to interview them, to show up, to allow them just to show up and just dish, right? And that's where like I really want to see more journalism when it comes to this stuff, like a more journalistic mindset, because that's going in and it's finding the stories and it's helping people tell their stories. And so I don't think somebody being busy should ever be a roadblock. It just opens up opportunity to do something different. Like if you can create like an ongoing interview series, which you do, where let's say your founder just shows up once every 2 weeks or something and you interview them on a topic, well, there you go. Right. I mean, it just gets these wheels going.
Yeah, it's easier than people think. And I just think it's also more powerful. Pushing this down the funnel though too is because like the third kind of thing I think is a pillar, and I know you have some mixed thoughts on this because it's employee driven content, which I know is not the terminology that you particularly like because it gets overused a bit, but employee participation. Like I think I look at it as an empowerment thing. Like you're signaling you're empowering your employees to have free reign to talk publicly, which not only do they like, obviously, but it sends a great signal to everyone externally. So if you're evaluating two organizations as a job seeker and you are hearing from 10 different people at this one organization and from nobody at the other, and everyone over in this first organization, loves their job and is allowed to think outside the box and come up with new ideas and do creative things, it has an enormous impact. Like you're going to have no problem hiring people.
Yeah. Okay. So there's a couple of things I want to talk about. And then I have a good example of a company who's really doing this at a large scale. So I think empowering employees to create their own content is one thing. The idea of employee generated content that I think is most prevalent in the employer branding industry is the one that I have issue with. And I don't have issue with the idea of it, but I have really strong opinions about the challenge of executing it. And I think this idea of employee generated content feels good because it's super authentic and you're giving your employees a voice, and tech companies will create tools to enable employees to record on their phone and share it on social. They'll create the tools, but it doesn't solve the execution problem, and it doesn't help the person leading this initiative, because in order to pull this off at any level of scale, you need to get buy-in. You need to get enough employees who are excited enough about your organization to want to talk about it. You have to put guardrails in place because it can't technically be a free-for-all, because who knows what you're going to get. It just like, I've talked to enough employer brand leaders who have tried this stuff and they go, it's too much work. And at the end of it, I get no content that I could actually use anyway. And so I think but there's a difference. There's a difference when it comes to the empowerment side and saying we have a policy that if you want to be vocal on LinkedIn, or you want to create thought leadership, or you want to create a personal brand or whatever, you have full autonomy to go and do that. If you want to post every day, if you want, whatever you want to do, that's different, because it's not saying that here's a tool, go and do it for this reason. It's really saying we value who you are as an individual. And this is just a policy and a mindset that we have company wide. I think those are two different things. One is extremely empowering. The other one can be frustrating and limiting.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of, it dovetails back to the first point we were talking about reviews. Like the goal is to just remind people and nudge that, hey, it'd be great if you wrote a review. Would you mind doing one? But leaving it at that, versus I do know of organizations that try to like make people write reviews, and it just never goes well.
Yeah.
They end up getting negative ones, or they get resentment and whatnot. But yeah, to your point, I think it's there's the difficult part, and not to go kind of down down a rabbit hole strictly on employees, is that it's not everyone's into it,
Right.
So it's just not something everyone would want to do on their own anyway. And so trying to make a policy out of it where it's like a major initiative. But that being said, like, I mean, I can speak firsthand that so it's myself and a handful of other people like enjoy creating content, and it's only people who want to do it can. And it's literally come up as a positive for every single person we've interviewed internally for the past year. Every single time. It's always come up in conversation, not us bringing it up, but whoever we're interviewing. It's tremendously powerful. Just because, I guess for all the reasons you mentioned, that, there are some people that would love to join because they want to take part in that. And then there's other people that just appreciate it because it's a breath of fresh air, because very few organizations do it.
Yeah. Yes, it's true. There's a company who's doing something similar. They're giving employees a voice, but they've created a framework to make it really easy. Are you familiar with Qualtrics?
I know the name off the top of my head.
Yeah. So big tech company. They're based in Utah. I had a call a couple weeks ago with one of their employer branding leads. She's incredibly smart, and she talked to me about this why Qualtrics story that they continue to tell. And they created a framework that then they could go to employees and say, here's the framework, plug yourself into it, and you tell the story. And they've done that over and over and over again, to the point now where they've done stories on 10% of their employees. That's like 350 stories. I haven't seen anybody do employee profiles at this scale. And it's so smart because they have just created the thing that then allows employees to share. It's just like, it's genius.
I'm totally going to steal that. So thank you.
You're welcome. It's good. You should go look at their career site.
I'm going to check it out.
There are story after story after story. It's awesome.
Other things. And this is kind of maybe the next tier, next level down. Okay. One thing I think is critically important is video, and video that's not professionally produced video, but video. If we're talking about your leaders, or if we're talking about your employees, encouraging them just to take a video on their phone or whatever. The point being versus text posting. Text posting is so impersonal. It's so easy to forget people. It's so easy to take things the wrong way. I think we've seen this in a one-to-one, like direct, like anybody who's been like doing Zoom calls with people externally in the organization, like you just build better relationships when you can kind of see a person. But even when it's not a direct conversation you're having with that person, I think that it gives you more perspective on the way someone articulates themselves and their intentions behind it. And especially if you're watching an interaction like you and I are having now, it's even better than if it's just someone monologuing or something like that. But I think it gives people a level of familiarity with the content creator, the person kind of posting it, which is what you want when you're trying to hire. It's one thing for anybody can put words on their website or words on social media, and you don't know how many people edited it, how many people were involved in the creation of that. But when you're hearing someone talk extemporaneously, like, it's their words, it's whatever they're saying is the way their delivery is. Like you're seeing a part of their personality and a part of what it's like to work with them that you're not seeing if it's a professionally produced video or if it's just some text post somewhere.
Yeah. I started recording these videos with our co-founder recently because we're building a new business unit. He and I are kind of we're two of the four people who are leading this charge, and he and I talk most often. And so we found like we would get on calls, and then we would start talking about ways we want to like change the industry, or opinions that we have about the industry, or of all this kind of stuff. And there were like these incredibly like inspiring conversations that were really showing how we're building this business. And one day I was like, we just need to start recording these and clipping them, because I want to show people the behind the scenes conversations, even like the difficult ones where we disagree, that nobody ever gets to see when somebody's building a company. And so we just started doing that. And it's great because that is somebody, he is somebody who's had no visibility whatsoever. And now all of a sudden there's this guy Jackson with me in calls, and that's what I'm talking about. It's like, there's just ways to do this that make it super easy for the other person. Like, I'm really into this stuff, so of course I'm going to put out the effort to do it, but bringing him in and just click and record. And now too, we are so comfortable with this level of video quality that it has opened things wide up. Whereas because we're on video calls so much, and we're just like, yeah, no, this is the way you do it. This is what I'm used to seeing. So taking a Zoom clip or a Zoom recording and clipping it down, it's like, it's just easy.
Well, I already think that the big takeaway from this, I think, because you and I talked about this beforehand, next week's show, or 2 weeks from now, the next show we do, let's do a how-to show. Let's get really granular and just how you do what you do, how I do what I do, spell it out for people, let them copy us if they want to, who cares? But I think it's a lot easier than people realize in terms of putting this stuff together. And that's the most daunting thing, is that, I've had conversations, a couple this summer, with people who are heads of marketing at places that are asking me like, hey, we're thinking about doing a podcast. Can I pick your brain? And I just think it's hysterically funny to me, because like,
I know
this is one of the whole marketing department, you know what I mean? Who like was asking for my advice on doing a word. I'm like, I just figured it out. You know what I mean? So I read a few Gary V posts and just did it, so, but it's easier than you realize, because like you and I, we're just, we're not marketing departments, you know what I mean? We're just two guys who decided to kind of put stuff together. But it's not to start getting back on making this talking about ourselves too much, but to your point, it's the video like this is such a humanizing factor, I think. And it's something that I think again, this is what's been effective for, I can speak firsthand in terms of, this is what's come up with everyone we interview, is these types of conversations, the things they see.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Okay. I was going to make it, I get a lot of people reaching out to me too about how do you create your video and stuff. I think it would just be really helpful.
Yeah. Next one. Which makes it good. We basically have the next show planned. What else do we have on here? There's one other kind of big thing. And I think we might be coming back to the same things, but I don't know if you want to kick this one off.
Which one?
Accessibility.
Yes.
Or I can do it.
Nope. It's okay. I'll start. I think the point of all of the stuff we're talking about just like creating awareness in general, it comes down to accessibility. It comes down to access. And when you can be available for people and not only like accessible from others, but gain access to people, that's a really powerful thing. And you don't realize how powerful it is until you leverage it. But you have to, but the thing is like if you want to gain access to certain people, you have to be super patient. You can't just be like, hey, I've posted a couple things, like, and just like start reaching out to people. Like, you have to invest time to like build this credibility and this trust and this like this idea that like, oh, this person knows their stuff. And then when that happens, though, it opens up a lot of doors. Like, we both experienced it, but we've also been extremely patient.
We've where should I start on this one? I'm going to fanboy out in the same organization 2 weeks in a row, but last time we talked, I mentioned Tasty Trade. The other thing that impressed me about these guys and actually changed the way I think about some of these topics, you can email literally anybody in the organization, including the CEO, and they will get back to you within a day.
Yeah.
Any question you got at all. Like, it's mind boggling. Like the CEO of the company, the CFO, the whoever. And, it's when I realized, and this is probably 5 years ago or 6 years ago, I realized that I mean, it changed my thinking because we're an organization, we're in recruiting, we get contacted by people constantly. And it became a big push for us that we want to have the same type of open book mindset where we want everyone to like, I expect anybody who's contacting us legitimately, not someone who's just like completely spamming us with, some sales pitch, but you know what I mean? But anybody who actually is looking for help with their career, even though it's not actually what we do, we help companies hire people, you know what I mean? As opposed to career coaching, although career-wise, I do that now too. But for historically, we'll still talk with anyone. And that carries over to the same way with, you build a reputation that way. You build a reputation for people who actually care, and bringing it back to hiring. I mean, the word, it again gets out there as well too. Whenever your organization has a good external reputation within your industry, especially an industry like ours, where a lot of companies in the recruiting space don't, the word gets around, and again, it makes it's easier to bring people on board when everyone, I'm just imagining if you're a software company and your CEO replies to people's emails, you know what I mean? Yeah. We talked about like executive leadership, getting involved in kind of the content process. But what if it's the next level further and, you actually email that guy who you have so much respect for because, you see how much they give to the community, and that person actually gets back to you, guy or man or woman. I think it's enormous, and that's how you get people to want to work for your company.
Mm-hmm. Well said, man. Yep.
So, anything else you want to talk about in this one? Because I know there were a couple other kind of supporting topics, but I think we might have hit some of them. But
just like the last thing that the thing I want to end with is that I want to get somewhat tactical. I just think there's a lot of stories that aren't being told that need to be told inside of companies, because whether people don't know how to find those stories, or maybe they're a little bit nervous to tell those stories, whatever. But I think that there are things that draw people to companies. And if you can create this like storytelling mechanism to where you're like going back to the journalism thing, like you're thinking like a journalist, like what do people care about? And what are the stories that we have that map back to what those people care about, and tell those? It's like, I just think there's a huge opportunity, because companies like the ones that we're talking about do things in a different way. And they might not realize how unique and special those things are. But when you like open up the hood, they're really special. And those are the reasons people stay. And those are the things you need to be talking about. So I want people to be thinking in this storytelling mode and going like levels deeper of like, what makes us really special, and how do we package that up to get that out in front of people? Because
I think
it's more important. Yeah.
Yeah. And I try to dumb it down to kind of my own process so I can kind of relate, and, sure. The topics and stuff that we've talked about this a million times, topics and stuff you and I talk about either comes down to like someone asks us a question and that's one thing we talk about, or we're just engaged in someone else's discussion and we came up with a point that we weren't thinking about actively ahead of time, but it kind of whatever the discussion was led us there. That's another thing we should be talking about. I think that works on the personal content creation level. On a company employer brand content creation level, I think it really comes down to being really tuned in, like you said, employee engagement. What do people really enjoy? What are the things that keep coming up? What are the positives of the organization? And making those your topics, as opposed to just sitting down in a vacuum saying, okay, what do we need to talk about? What's going to impress people? Because I think that's what, whether it's like individual content or employer content, that's always where people get stuck, is they try to just sit there and think of what do I know that everyone's going to like? Or what is it about our company everyone's going to like? Right. As opposed to getting feedback and having it kind of come to you from some other source outside of your own brain. It's always going to be way more relevant that way.
It is. Do you know what story I really want to see? I want to see a blog post from a SaaS company that's about their sales team that says, "We don't ring gongs," and have it be about how they are not this bro culture, gong ringing, quota crushing friggin' environment. Because honestly, that's the stereotype.
Yeah.
But there are companies who are not that, who do things different, who do really well. And I want to see somebody tell that story because it'll just attract all the right people. I've been thinking about this story for like a year.
I've been, this another potential future topic. Like I love the idea that like companies need to get their sales team trained in brand marketing.
Yeah.
And I think we're getting completely off kind of the thing here, but to your point about kind of talking about sales organizations, I do think that's something that in order to take that next step, there's a different level of a different type of training that's needed. But to what you were just saying, I think it comes from an organization that first has to divorce itself from that bro culture mindset. But anyway.
Yeah. No, that's a topic I'm on a kick right now with that topic. So we can talk about it. All right.
Well, cool. I think we're good for this week. Why don't we, when we got some things kind of already lined up. I love it when we can do a show and also turn that into a brainstorming session for the next one. Anyways, that's a wrap for the Employer Content Show. If you want to hear more of what Nate and I have to say, you can subscribe to the Hire Well channel on YouTube, where we have a playlist of all of our episodes, and the Talent Insights podcast, which is available on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and just recently added to Amazon.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Nate,
good to see you.
Pleasure as always.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Stick around, and you and I stick around. Let's start working on the next one. Everyone else, we'll see you soon.